The morning of my graduation ceremony, I woke up to a house that felt wrong. Not wrong like something was broken or out of place. Wrong like the kind of quiet that settles in after everyone's already left. I lay there for a second, staring at the water stain on my apartment ceiling, telling myself I was overthinking it. It was 6:45 in the morning. Of course it was quiet. I got up and made coffee. The ceremony didn't start until 10, but my family had said they'd come by at 8 so we could drive over together. My brother had even texted me 2 nights before, "We'll be there, don't stress," and I'd screenshot it, which probably tells you everything you need to know about the kind of family I come from. You don't screenshot a text that you trust. I'd spent 7 years getting to this day. 7 years of nursing school, then the accelerated RN to BSN program, then the 2-year master's program for nurse practitioner licensure, all while working 30-plus hours a week at the hospital because no one was going to pay my rent for me. I had $34,000 in student loans, a beat-up Honda with a cracked bumper, and a ceremony sash I'd ironed 3 times the night before because I wanted it to look perfect. This was the biggest thing I'd ever done, and I wanted my family there. 8 o'clock came and went. I called my mum. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. I texted my brother, the one who said, "We'll be there, don't stress." Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed in my ceremony gown and told myself there was traffic. There's always traffic. It was a Saturday morning in May. Probably half the city was doing something. By 8:45, I drove to the venue alone. I found out what happened from my aunt, who heard it from a neighbor, which is the kind of information chain that should have embarrassed my family but didn't. My brother had been planning a long weekend trip to Savannah for months. Him, his wife, and my parents. They'd booked it before my graduation date was confirmed, or at least that's what he said later. When the dates overlapped, he didn't tell me, didn't ask to reschedule, didn't even offer to zoom in for 10 minutes. They just went. They left Thursday night, and nobody thought to mention it to me until I was standing in a parking garage in my cap and gown, with nowhere to be. There was a note though. My mum had slid it under my apartment door sometime while I was asleep. I found it when I got home that afternoon. It was written on the back of an old grocery list in her handwriting, and it said, "We know you'll understand. This was the only weekend that worked for everyone. You've always been the strong one." I sat on the floor and read that line 4 or 5 times. The strong one. That's what they'd been calling me my whole life, and I'd been stupid enough to think it was a compliment. It wasn't. It was permission. It was their way of saying, "We don't have to show up for you, because you'll be fine either way. You always are." I want to be honest about something. My brother isn't a monster. My parents aren't evil people. But there is a particular kind of damage that gets done to the kid in a family who never falls apart, who keeps their grades up and their job and their apartment clean and their voice steady even when things are hard. People stop worrying about that kid. They stop thinking about her at all, really. She becomes the background of everyone else's story. Reliable. Low maintenance. Fine. My younger brother, on the other hand, had been the family project for as long as I could remember. He dropped out of college twice. There'd been a DUI at 23 that my parents quietly paid off. A failed business that my dad had invested in, which was a delicate subject we all stepped around at holidays. Every family trip, every dinner, every long phone call my mum had, it was always about him, his situation, what he needed, what might help. I understood it, in the abstract. He was struggling and I wasn't. But I had spent a decade telling myself that this dynamic would eventually balance out, that one day they'd look up and see me. This was supposed to be that day. My best friend showed up at my door around noon with Thai food and a bottle of wine. She hadn't been able to come to the ceremony because of her own kid's soccer tournament, but she'd been texting me all morning, and when I stopped responding, she drove over. She sat with me on the floor. We'd done a lot of talking on floors over the years, and she didn't say much. She didn't tell me my family was terrible or that I should cut them off or any of the things that felt too big to hear right then. She just said, "You did this. Nobody can take that from you." I cried for about 40 minutes. Then I ate pad thai and eventually started to feel like a person again. What I didn't tell her, what I hadn't told anyone except my boyfriend, was that I'd already accepted a position at one of the top hospital systems in the state, Director of Advanced Practice. I'd be overseeing a team of nurse practitioners and working directly with the Chief Medical Officer on clinical protocols. The offer had come 3 weeks before graduation, and the salary was more money than both my parents had ever made combined in a single year. I hadn't announced it because I didn't want it to seem like I was showing off. I didn't want to make my brother feel bad about where he was in his life. I'd been softening my own success for so long it had become habit. My boyfriend had been watching me do this for the 2.5 years we'd been together. He was the CFO of a regional healthcare consulting firm. He'd built it from a 2-person startup to a 60-employee company, and he had the kind of quiet confidence that came from having done something real. He wasn't flashy about it. He drove a sensible car and wore the same brand of watch he'd bought in his 20s. But when we went to his family's house for Sunday dinners, I watched how they talked to each other, how his parents asked about his work with genuine curiosity and remembered details from conversations 3 months ago. I didn't say anything, but I felt it every time. That's what I'd been missing. That's what I'd been calling normal my whole life, when actually it wasn't. He'd wanted to come to the graduation ceremony. I told him not to. I said I wanted that morning to be with my family. He'd said okay, of course, and he'd booked us a dinner reservation for that evening at a restaurant I'd been wanting to try for months. When I texted him from the parking garage that morning and told him what had happened, he called me immediately and offered to drive to the ceremony right then. I told him it was almost over. He made me promise to come over afterward. I did. I showed up at his place in my gown because I hadn't changed out of it, and he opened the door and didn't say anything for a second, just looked at me, and then he said, "You look like someone who just earned something." We had dinner on his back porch instead of the restaurant because I didn't feel like being around people, and it was honestly better, quieter. He opened a bottle of something good that his parents had given him for exactly this kind of occasion, and his mom called at some point during dinner to congratulate me. She'd remembered the date, and I had to put the phone down for a second and look at the sky because I didn't want to cry in front of her. I didn't hear from my family for 6 days. When my brother finally texted, it was a photo. Him and his wife and my parents standing in front of some fountain in Savannah, everyone smiling, my dad giving a thumbs up. The caption said, "Had an amazing trip? Hope your day was great too, IY Threat." I stared at it for a long time. I'd been going back and forth about what to say, how to say it, whether to say anything at all. My boyfriend had a gentle opinion about this, which was that I should take some time before responding, because I'd regret anything I said in the first week. My best friend had a less gentle opinion, which was that I should respond with a single period and nothing else. I ended up doing something in between, which was nothing at all. I put my phone face down on the counter and went to bed. About 2 weeks after graduation, my new employer announced my appointment in their official communications. The hospital system had a large presence in the state, active on LinkedIn, a newsletter that went out to about 12,000 people in the healthcare community. They ran a short profile on me, the new Director of Advanced Practice, with a photo from my credentialing headshot. It mentioned my educational background, my clinical experience, my previous work, and my new role. It was professional and straightforward, and I thought maybe 200 people would read it, and that would be the end of it. My phone started buzzing during a meeting on my first day. Former colleagues, nursing school professors, a few people I'd lost touch with years ago. Everyone had seen the announcement and was reaching out. I was trying to be discreet about it, glancing at my phone under the conference table like a teenager, when my new administrative assistant leaned over and whispered that someone from my personal contacts was also trying to reach me. I checked after the meeting. 12 missed calls, 8 from my brother, 4 from my mum, and a voicemail from my mother that I played once, in my car, in the parking garage, before my first full day of work was even over. She was saying she'd seen the announcement on LinkedIn. My brother had shown her. She was saying she had no idea, she didn't realize, she was so proud, she wished she'd known sooner, she wished she could have been at the ceremony. Her voice cracked at the end. I sat in the parking garage for a while after that. I want to be clear about something. I didn't plan any of this as revenge. I didn't take the job to make my family feel bad. I didn't stay quiet about the salary or the title or the promotion to set some kind of trap. I stayed quiet because I'd spent my whole life staying quiet, making things smaller, making myself easier to overlook. The only thing I did differently this time was that I stopped explaining myself to people who weren't asking. My brother called again that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He left first time he'd ever left me a voicemail in his adult life, I think. And the gist of it was that he'd been showing Mum things on the internet, and they'd seen the profile, and he just wanted to say he was proud of me and that he was sorry they'd missed the graduation. And he said it in that particular voice he uses when he's genuinely uncomfortable, not performing, which made it harder to be angry at. I didn't call back that night, or the next. What I was doing instead was something I'd never really let myself do before. I was enjoying my own life. My boyfriend had started introducing me to his colleagues at events, and I was meeting people who asked good questions and listened to the answers. We'd started talking, carefully and then less carefully, about what the next couple of years might look like for us. His mother had started sending me recipes. His father had shaken my hand at a dinner and said, "We're glad he found you," and I'd almost dropped my glass. I called my mum back on a Sunday, about 3 weeks after she'd left the voicemail. I'd thought about what I wanted to say and what I didn't, and I'd decided that I wasn't going to perform anger I didn't fully feel anymore, and I wasn't going to perform forgiveness I hadn't fully reached either. I just wanted to be honest. She answered on the second ring. She started talking right away, the way she does when she's nervous, and I let her go for a bit. She talked about the Savannah trip, how it had been her brother's birthday, how the dates had just worked out that way, how she'd meant to call and warn me, how everything had gotten so hectic. And then she got quiet, and I said, "Mom, I needed you there." She didn't say anything for a moment. "I know," she said finally. "I know you did." That was all she said. No excuse, no pivot, no redirection to something else. Just those 4 words. And something in me that had been pulled tight for weeks just loosened a little. Not all the way, but a little. We talked for almost an hour. I told her about the job, the real version, not the softened one. I told her what the role meant, what it would allow me to do clinically, what I hoped to build. She listened in a way she doesn't always. She asked questions that surprised me. At some point she started crying a little, not dramatically, just quietly, and she said she didn't know when I'd grown up so much without her noticing. I told her she'd be looking somewhere else. She didn't argue with that. My brother and I had a longer, harder conversation the following weekend. He came over to my apartment, which he'd never done. He'd been to my place maybe twice in the years I'd lived there. He brought coffee and sat in the chair by my window and actually looked around the apartment, at the bookshelves, the photos, the NP certification hanging on the wall. He said, "I've never really seen where you live before." I said I knew. "He's not going to become a different person. I'm not expecting that." But something shifted between us, and I think it's because for the first time I stopped managing his feelings about my life. I told him it hurt, what he'd done. I told him I'd grown up feeling invisible in our family and that graduation was supposed to be the moment that changed, and he'd taken it from me without even thinking about it because he knew I'd be fine. He sat with that for a long time without deflecting, which, if you knew my brother, you'd know was something. "You were always so together," he said eventually. "I didn't think you needed us." "I didn't need you to save me," I told him. "I needed you to show up." He nodded. He didn't have a good answer for that, and he didn't try to manufacture one. That was probably the most honest conversation we'd ever had. My boyfriend asked me to move in with him in July. I said yes in about 4 seconds, which is the fastest I've made any major decision in my adult life, and which probably tells you something about how certain I was. His parents helped us move. They showed up with his dad's truck and his mum made sandwiches, and we spent the whole day in a kind of cheerful chaos that I still think about when things are hard. My mum came for a few hours in the afternoon. She and his mother talked in the kitchen for a long time. I watched them from the doorway and felt something I couldn't quite name then, though I think what it was relief. My family has been trying. It's not perfect. There are still times I feel the old invisible feeling, and there are still Sunday dinners where the conversation circles back to my brother's latest thing while my news gets a polite nod. I notice it now in a way I didn't before, or maybe I just let myself notice it. I stopped convincing myself it was fine when it wasn't. But I stopped waiting for them to see me, which it turns out is a different thing from giving up. I stopped making myself smaller to make the room more comfortable. I stopped softening the numbers, hedging the titles, downplaying the hours I'd put in. When someone asks what I do, I tell them, fully, without the apology I used to attach to every sentence. I worked for this. Nobody gave it to me. Every shift I worked, exhausted, every exam I crammed for at midnight, every patient I stayed late for because it was the right thing to do, that was me, just me, and I was done pretending otherwise. The day I signed my final credentialing paperwork at the hospital, I drove home past my old nursing school. I don't know why I went that way, it wasn't on my route. But I sat at the stoplight in front of the building where I'd spent 2 of the hardest years of my life, and I thought about the girl who'd gone in there terrified and come out the other side, and I felt something uncomplicated and clean. I didn't need my family to see it to make it real. It was real either way. I still think about that note sometimes. Written on the back of a grocery list, "You've always been the strong one." 7 words that were supposed to be a compliment but were really just a door being closed quietly in my face. What I've come to understand, not all at once but slowly the way you understand most things that actually matter, is that the way people treat you is almost always a reflection of what they believe you need. And my family believed I needed nothing, because I had never shown them otherwise. I kept my pain tidy, I kept my wins quiet. I made myself easy to overlook, and then I was surprised when I got overlooked. That's not entirely their fault. Some of it was mine. But here's the thing about carrying yourself like you don't need anyone. The people around you will eventually believe you, and they'll stop offering. Not out of cruelty. My brother isn't cruel, but out of habit, out of the human tendency to put your attention where the noise is. I was never the noise. I was the hum in the background, steady and easy to tune out. What changed wasn't that my promotion announcement went online and my family suddenly saw my worth. What changed was that I stopped needing them to. That shift happened quietly, mostly in parking garages and on my boyfriend's back porch and on the floor of my apartment with my best friend and a box of Thai food. It happened in the small moments when I chose not to shrink. When I told my mother the real salary instead of the softened version. When I let my brother sit with the discomfort of what he'd done instead of rushing to smooth it over for him. Integrity, I've learned, isn't something you perform for people who are watching. It's the thing that holds you together when nobody is. Every late shift I worked, every exam I passed at midnight, every time I showed up for a patient when I had nothing left, that was integrity, quiet and unremarkable. And it compounded over time into something real. Something that couldn't be undone by a missed graduation or a thumbs-up photo in front of a fountain. Intelligence, the useful kind, isn't just about knowing things. It's about knowing which things to act on and which things to wait out. I could have responded to my brother's photo with everything I felt. I had the words. I'd rehearsed them more than once in my head, standing at the kitchen counter, face-down phone nearby. But wisdom is knowing the difference between a moment that needs your voice and a moment that needs your silence. I chose silence, and the truth surfaced anyway, the way it usually does. And the grit, the years of it, the grinding, unglamorous kind that nobody claps for while it's happening, that was always mine. Nobody handed me the director title. Nobody sat beside me at midnight with the textbooks. The people who missed the ceremony didn't miss the degree. I still have it. I earned it in the hours when everyone else was asleep or elsewhere. My family is trying now, and I'm letting them. Not because the note on the grocery list didn't hurt. It did. But because I finally understand that the most powerful thing I can do isn't to make them feel what I felt. It's to keep building the life they almost made me believe I didn't deserve. That's the ending I chose. Not loud, not dramatic, just mine.